right, it is Matt Mosley's Obstructed View podcast. John, as if Jon Machota is joining us from Oxnard, California, where the Cowboys are beginning their training camp. Although tomorrow, really, because we'll hear from Mike McCarthy, so that'll be Thursday as we record this on Wednesday. But John's been known; he likes to get into position early out there in Southern California. And John, I'm sure you're shocked by seeing some regular glasses that I'm wearing. I know that is somewhat shocking to you, but this is fun. You seem to have good accommodations. You're out there. You have a special condo. You're not at the Ventura Beach Marriott where we stayed for years, and Ed and I still try to stay. And in fact, Werder and I, if you're curious at all, 6th through the 9th, we will be arriving in August. Okay, and so
nice.
We'll be there for that Rams. I think honestly, Ed has always somehow missed the media party, and like this whole thing was planned around him being able to go to the media party. So, and this should be entertaining. Jerry will have some new stories to tell. It is, and speaking of Jerry, John, there's no other. It's only the Cowboys that could start camp with a story so weird, and we won't get too far into that. Although the stuff coming out of the courtroom in Texarkana was rather interesting, but it abruptly ended that court case. And because Jerry was testifying, we were supposed to have Jerry and the kind of the State of the Union Cowboys address today, which is Wednesday. It has now been moved to Saturday because of what Jerry was dealing with. John, will you want to be like the first person to jump in there and maybe ask Jerry about how things went in the courtroom in Texarkana, or will you leave that to somebody else?
That's a good question because I was getting dinner with some other reporters last night, and we talked about that a little bit. There's kind of an order with how questions are asked right now with new PR. So David Moore always goes first. Clarence will probably go second. Todd Archer will probably go third, and then I'll probably be fourth. And to be honest with you, by the fourth question, for what I do and for the company I work for, I don't see that being as important as the football stuff. And one of the reasons I say that is because of how little they've done in the offseason and what this team's expected to do. There's just a lot of questions about the Cowboys that, frankly, that's what people are reading me for anyway. And so I probably won't, but I do think that he will be asked that. And it is interesting you even bring that up because, like you said, it was supposed to be today, was the press conference, and then it got moved to Saturday. But because everything got concluded with the court side of it, now they're saying that possibly it could be tomorrow that we might get them for their opening. So you know how it is with the Cowboys. So you don't know for sure. You just kind of be on your toes and just expect whatever. But I do expect him to get asked about that. I don't think I'll be the one doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe at the end, if nobody else gets to it, maybe I'll throw one in. But when they first call on me, I'll probably ask a football question.
I mean, I thought that was the most Jerry thing ever to the woman or pretty much the group he's suing, right? The mom of the alleged daughter, Jerry was consoling her after she had tearful. And again, that kind of speaks to Jerry because while it's embarrassing for the organization, and this is a weird story to start Cowboys camp, that's Jerry, right? He's at court. He's suing these people for the money he spent trying to fight this case. So he's suing them. And the woman basically that's part of, one of the defendants, he's consoling after some of the testimony. And then later tells some reporters afterwards, hey, she's been a very, very good friend over the years. I mean, it's so, again, I don't think he's ever, you can read into things, but I think publicly he's denied that he's the father. And he now does not have to take a paternity test. And I do the one detail, not to get too far into this, but I found really interesting. The mom apparently of the daughter, the alleged daughter, was hugging Jerry, and I think she kind of waved the daughter up there, perhaps to be part of some kind of group hug, and the daughter declined. The daughter's like, no, that's okay. I'm going to hold off. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay. I mean, that would have been very, very strange. And again, you always wonder, what's the rest of the family think? But the truth of it is, the rest of the family is used to weirdness and odd stories over the years. Okay, so I think anybody thinking, oh my gosh, the Joneses, how are they dealing with this? They're probably dealing with it just fine. Now, let me start with this, John. I found it interesting in Mike McCarthy's first media availability that he did at least admit to, boy, apparently, I don't know, did Saad do something wrong? Or authorities are arriving out there at your condo.
Yeah,
Yeah. I hope,
yeah. I think we're in trouble here.
I hope you haven't done anything. But Mike admitting that it's a challenge, I think is the word he used, to be going into this in the final year of his contract. Now, again, he kind of deflected and said, hey, this can be a good thing, and la, 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 la. But he also, I think, talked about the other coaches and their families and how that's a different thing for them, too. John, what it's setting up is, I mean, whether it be Dak, CeeDee, Mike, McCarthy, the head coach, I mean, I don't know what training camp's exactly going to be like, but it is an odd deal. Did you find that interesting that Mike at least admitted that, yeah, this poses some issues with having to deal with this? Because so far he's really kind of avoided saying anything like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's surprising because I know that he feels that way because he does care about his coaching staff. Obviously, the several members in that coaching staff are people he's known for a long time, and they're obviously not making the money that he makes. And so I get all of that. And if I was in his position, I would feel the same way, but I'm not. And then from my position, the way I look at it is that's kind of the NFL. So let's just pretend that Mike got a new 3-year extension. If things go bad enough this year, he's still out. Like there's no like no, he's got 3 years, we're gonna give him this isn't the NBA guaranteed contracts. Like you're out. Like that you just look across the league, teams are changing coaches and coaching staffs all the time, like year after year. So I don't know how much stability you even have, even if he got, let's say, because I don't know if it would be a 5-year deal. But let's say Jerry after the season was like, I need to give some stability. I'm going to give him an extra 2 or 3 years or something. I don't know that even means anything if things go poorly this year. So because of that, I just think it's a show me business. And to be honest, they had to win in the postseason for Jerry to want to give Mike another contract. And you can say that's unfair or whatever, but that was the reason they hired him. And they haven't done it in the playoffs. As great as they've been in the regular season, they haven't done anything in the playoffs that's been any different than was happening before under Jason Garrett. There's been more consistency in the regular season. They've been a better regular season team, but they haven't been better in January. And so I wouldn't expect him to say anything else. It didn't surprise me that he said that. I mean, it sucks. That's part of the business, though. But when you're in coaching, though, that's especially major college pro level. That's your everyday life. That hey, let's not go ahead and get the huge house just yet. We might not be here, unless you're the head coach. We might not be here that long. So,
and
look at the beginning of his coaching staff. Like after 1 year, the DC was gone. The defensive line coach, the DC's number 2 is gone after 1 year. I mean, I don't think Mike Nolan goes, Mike, let me join your staff. Let me join your staff. I'll be here for only 1 year. He didn't expect that. I mean, stuff changes quickly.
So it almost seems too trite to use one of Jerry's favorite words.
That sounded like Jerry.
Yeah, trite, man. I'm sorry, I've been late to training camp. It seems to say, well, they have to make it to an NFC title game because that's something that hasn't happened in forever. Okay, 1995 season, the 96 calendar year. So, and you can't really come up with a regular season number of wins, can you? Because 3 years, 36 wins. It's almost kind of like, I mean, first of all, the Green Bay thing was just an utter embarrassment for every single really there's nobody that looked good in that. It was an embarrassment to everybody in the organization. So when you try to put a number or he's got to do this, is it? I mean, it's just impossible to do, isn't it? You can't really say. I mean, is it fair at all to say he has to win in the divisional round to keep his job? I mean, I don't really think that's the case, is it?
It's not, because of the fact that the other part of this is, who does he have that he thinks would be the better option if it goes poorly? Is that Bill Belichick? If you were to look at any of these sites that have Vegas lines, the Cowboys on most of them are the favorite for Bill Belichick. So that's not to say that Jerry feels that way. I mean, let's be honest. Jerry could have Bill Belichick right now. It's not like Bill Belichick is with another team. It's not like he. I mean, he has taken the spot of how previously people would talk about potentially Sean Payton being the heir apparent or the next guy, in Dallas. Well, now that he's with Denver, that's not the obvious answer. So Jerry would have to have someone that he clearly thinks is better than Mike, and a lot will determine how this season goes. But I can't sit here and tell you that, well, they have to get to the NFC Championship game or he won't get another contract. They could deal with a bunch of injuries, and they could be a wild card team and win a couple of playoff games, and Jerry could come out next in January or February and say, I've given it a lot of thought, but I just still think Mike's the right guy. This playoffs 4 years in a row, I think we're building something here. I want to keep going in this direction. I'm not saying that most organizations would do that, but you can't rule out completely that Jerry won't, and Jerry will be the one that makes the decision on that. But the one that is, as we sit here today, the way Jerry has to feel off of coming off that Green Bay game, that's not just a bad loss last season. That's not just a bad loss the last 5 years. I'd make the argument that might be the worst loss in Cowboys history, just because of what they had, and then the fact that they were the 2 seed and how well they've been playing at home the last 2 years. Another 12-win season they were supposed to be building, and they didn't just lose to the Packers. They were destroyed. They were down 32 midway through the fourth quarter. It was not a close game at all. That's embarrassing in today's NFL by any standards. And the only thing that would have softened that blow is if Green Bay went on to win the Super Bowl. Green Bay went on to look like Green Bay in the next round. Like, they were a good team. They're not a team that should be beating you at home by 32 in the fourth quarter. So I feel like sometimes people forget that. That's really bad. Their last time the Cowboys were on the field, it was epically bad, to the point that if Jerry went in another direction in the offseason, you couldn't sit there and fault him for it. So I don't know if we need a refresher on this. Yeah. I know he hasn't done anything in the offseason. You can point plenty of blame at Jerry, but Jerry also wasn't on the field in January against Green Bay. That was real bad. And as you pointed out, it was bad for everybody. So you can point fingers at everybody. There's really nobody you can other than maybe Brandon Aubrey. And that's about it. So,
okay, do you sense, and Jon Machota, you'll also hear him on ESPN Central Texas, of course. It is he's on the Obstructed View Matt Mosley podcast here. Do you sense, John, that CeeDee Lamb, some of these receivers and players don't have the stomach to stay, go for the long haul, like hold out all of camp? Now, CeeDee can point to Zeke. They obviously caved on Zeke, and Zeke got a big contract because Jason Garrett basically said, you can't ask me to coach for my job and not give me one of my best players, right? And so I remember Steven telling me, like, right up in my face, almost like, I'm like, Steven, are you afraid of the precedent this? And he said something like, you better be a damn good player to try this, to do this. Steven said something along those lines. Does CeeDee have the stomach for this? And how do you see this playing out?
He definitely does, and he has all of the leverage. And another factor in this, if you're CeeDee Lamb, and I know, so there's two sides to it. If you're a Cowboys fan, you want these guys to sign for like $5 million and just be happy to play for the Cowboys because it's whatever. But I'm talking like if I'm CeeDee Lamb right now. The Zeke one is a great example. Very important to that team's success. You can argue the exact same thing about CeeDee Lamb. They didn't go out and add any new receivers. They got worse at running back. Their offensive line's not going to be as good as it was last year. You take CeeDee Lamb away from there, that's not a good offense at all. That's bottom half, might be one of the worst in the league. And which also, the fact that that's also, even if he does get a new contract and everything, and he's out there on the field, which I do think will happen eventually, he'll be the number one thing that everyone's trying to take away. And so how is he dealing with that? We've already seen times where he's been frustrated on the sideline. If he doesn't get a new contract, and he feels he's one of the top 2-3 receivers in the league, which I believe he is. If he's like that and he doesn't get a new deal, he's playing under the final year of his rookie year deal, 5th-year deal. How is he going to be when they're putting 2-3 guys on him, being like, all these teams are like, well, we just take away CeeDee Lamb. What are they beating us with? Not that running game. And then all of a sudden now he's getting 2-3 catches in a game. You think he's going to be just fine with that? Like, it's in their best interest to get a deal done with him. Also, it's in their best interest because the parameters are there. You're not giving him less than 32. He's better than all the receivers that are getting 32. You don't want to give him 35 like Justin Jefferson? You don't think he's quite on that level? That's fine. It's between 32 and 35. He has said that he doesn't need to be the highest paid. Excuse me. He needs to be one of the highest paid. So there's not like we're sitting here going, God, well, what? I don't know where you even meet with something on this. They have to be somewhere in the ballpark of where this is at. And I do think it'll ultimately get done because while you mentioned Zeke, you can go right back to last year with Zach Martin. He did the same exact thing, and he got what he wanted. And this is Jerry Jones with wide receivers, star receivers. He's going to pay CeeDee Lamb. I just think what's going to happen is they're going to make it to where he's not out here for a couple of weeks. Heck, maybe he's not out here for all of camp. But ultimately, when they play week 1 in Cleveland, I still firmly believe CeeDee Lamb's on the field, and he's got a new contract.
And it'll be enormous. I mean, it'll, the contract will obviously, maybe it'll. I mean,
let me ask you. Well, hold on. Let me ask you this, Matt. Who do you feel more comfortable with right now, giving them what they're going to have to get? If you had to pick, Dak Prescott, we're going to say at $55 million per year, 4-year deal, or 4-year deal for CeeDee Lamb at $34 million. Who do you feel more comfortable giving money to? If Jerry's like, Matt, we got to do a deal with one of these guys, and it can only be one. Which one do you feel more comfortable with?
Probably CeeDee, just because it's like, isn't it funny how we blame, like, when we really truly come down to like all this playoff failures, we obviously we remove a lot of the players like CeeDee from the conversation,
right?
And it comes back to Dak, right?
Right.
Like
yeah.
He hadn't done it. Well, the other players haven't either.
Right.
But yeah, and so yeah, probably just because of the money and everything. He's more of a sure thing, although you almost never get to the end of these deals and feel great about when you've committed to that insane high. You certainly didn't with Zeke. I would say toward the end of the Dez contract, when they did a huge deal with him, that was a declining player, if I remember correctly. So it's like baseball pitchers. You never, especially not even just pitchers, position players. You're going to, in baseball especially, you go 7 or 8 years and or 10 years with Shohei, and you're like, they're probably not going to be that great at 38 or 39, but we've got to do this deal. So I don't know. How do you feel about it from between doing a 5-year, $55-60 million a year with Dak over the $35 million a year with CeeDee?
I would do CeeDee because of the fact that I don't know that we've seen CeeDee's best yet. I mean, you can just, like I say, look on the back of the football card. You don't even need to watch the games. Every single season, he's improving in all areas, and his stats will tell you as much. So because of that, I do think he's a legitimate like top 3 receiver in the league, and I still think that he's got better years ahead of him. I personally would have already had this Dak deal done. I think that they should re-sign Dak. I don't think Dak's a top 5 quarterback, but I think he's top 10. And going in another direction, I think gives you a way better chance of you getting a quarterback worse than Dak than you do one as good or better than him. I think it's a huge risk if they let him get to the open market and he goes elsewhere. I don't have a lot of confidence that we'll find a quarterback as good as Dak. But if you're making me make that decision right now between those two players, I would probably do CeeDee. One other thing on CeeDee, let me just bring this up too.
Yeah.
He's had so many different quarterbacks like throughout when he was in college, and I believe it was the same when he was in high school. And I feel like they all play great with him. Like there really hasn't been an issue for any team because he had Hurts, Baker. I mean, these are good quarterbacks too. Did he play with Kyler too? I think he did play with Kyler too. So I mean, he's played with a lot of different quarterbacks, and he's produced with all of them. So that's a part of it with me too, where I'm just like, I don't know that you just give him any quarterback and he'll be fine, but he's shown that he can be productive with a lot of different players throwing him the football. Now, again, those are Oklahoma had a hell of a run. I mean, those are good quarterbacks. So,
yeah, I just it's just interesting, John, to watch the rest of the league, whether it's kind of getting something done to Stafford's liking, whether it's getting the huge things down at receiver. Even Ayuk, who's been unhappy, showed up. But you're right; these guys have. I mean, like, if wouldn't that be fascinating? If when will they could could technically Micah hold out if he wanted to right now?
I don't think he can. Because I don't think he's to that part of his rookie contract where
Okay.
and also
Okay.
by the way, he has no interest in that right now.
All
Next
right.
off
All right.
season would be potentially when he could do something like that. But just when we talked to him, um, it was after one of the mini camp practices at his locker for a while. I mean, it was probably 10, 15 minutes on the record, another 10 minutes off. Never at during any point of that 20, 30 minutes did I ever get any sense from him that he
Okay.
is even concerned about that right now. Now, next offseason, I can see that stuff coming into play. But yeah, he's fine. He knows that Dak and CD are ahead of him. And also, let's be honest, he's fine with it because he sees these numbers too.
Yeah.
Like if he really wanted a new contract, let's say like it was last year, let's say it was one of those things where it was like, hey, you did great on your first 3 years of your rookie contract. I want a new deal. He would not get the deal that he could get today, and today he probably can't get the deal that he'll get next year if he puts another
Yeah.
great season out like that. Because we're not talking about highest paid defensive player anymore. We're talking that he's lined up to where he'll be the highest paid non-quarterback. So that's going to be north of probably 35 million.
You know, the last time they did a deal with Dak, and it kind of was, a drawn out process, right? And they finally got it done. I think, I think both sides. I do think Dak, and he didn't make a huge thing of it, but it did at some point kind of start to make him uncomfortable. And I even think Troy Aikman talked to that a little bit, like about how it where it could get. And now, I mean, if he just wants to play this thing out, and I mean, it's just it's hard to have anything to compare it to. I guess Cousins in some ways, um, you know, I
Oh, I think the Stafford one's not a bad comp. You brought up
okay,
Stafford, and,
yeah,
and part of me wonders if Jerry, in the back of his mind, and again, like with the Cowboys, you don't really have to talk about a lot of different people. Jerry listens to a lot of different people, but he's going to be the one that ultimately makes the decision. And if he even has a little seed planted in his brain that, wow, look at how that worked out for the Lions. Like, they moved on from Stafford when everybody was like, that's the best thing you got going for you outside of Calvin Johnson. And then you get this Jared Goff, and you go in a new direction with this other head coach, and all of a sudden, now the Lions are having the best. They're playing the best football that they've played in 30 years. What if there's a part of Jerry that feels that way? Because I
mm,
maintain that if they win a couple playoff games, I think Dak's deal's already done. I just feel like the actions speak louder than words, and the actions right now are that Jerry still wants to see more because there's no reason for this deal not to have been done already. Unless he still wants to see, let me just see one more year. I know it's going to cost me, but it's going to cost me right now too. So why not just wait to see? And then I also think that factors in with how little he's done in the offseason because he knows once he pays Dak and CeeDee and Micah, the roster they have right now, that's going to be the type of roster they're going to have going forward. They're not going to be able to spend a lot of money and put all these weapons and upgrade the roster. Once they pay those three guys at that type of level, they're going to have to be the ones that elevate the team, like a Mahomes, Chris Jones, Travis Kelsey, and you're going to have decisions where you let a Tyreek Hill go. But I think Jerry still wants to see more. There's others that cover this team that will argue with me on this, and that's fine. But the actions speak louder than words, and the actions are, why are we still sitting here without him having a new deal unless Jerry wants to see more from him?
and that to work with your theory, how does that make Dak feel, and like his teammates even because if we agree he's a top whatever 7 or 8 quarterback in the league, it's just most quarterbacks are never allowed to get to this point. Lamar had the weird thing and then finally, got paid. It happens pretty rarely these days. Are star quarterbacks allowed to get to this point? Do you think Dak is just totally fine, or do you think, like, privately, does this put him? Do you think he feels weird about this? Do you think this kind of puts him at odds with Jerry to a certain extent? I don't really see it affecting him on the field, but it creates some level of uncomfortability or awkwardness.
For sure, and Jerry's great with dealing with that, and I would argue that Dak is great with dealing with that as well. So you have two people that I don't think this will be a big issue. I think behind the scenes, I think Dak feels he's probably a top 5 quarterback. If you've produced the way Dak Prescott has in the NFL over the last 8 seasons, you'd probably feel the same too. You wouldn't really care for people saying, "Oh, well, yeah, that's great in the regular season," and yeah, you were second to Lamar in MVP, but you can't get it done in January. I bet you he thinks he's top 5, and he thinks he'll be paid accordingly by some team, whether it's the Cowboys or someone else. I think, though, that he prefers to stay with the Cowboys. But I also think there's a part of him that understands that if they were to go another direction, where he would be like, yeah, I needed to play better in January, and I didn't. And he's going to get another chance to do that this year. They have a roster that, although I don't think it's better than last year's, it's still good enough to make the playoffs and capable of them getting hot and making a run. But I bet he feels fine with it. I mean, look at the last time he was up for a contract. You go into that 2020 season, and he has that gruesome ankle injury that, there was probably a time in sports where that would have been a career ender. He comes back from that, and he's limping when he's at that press conference to get the new contract. It's not like he was back 100%, and that was coming off of a major injury where the bone is sticking out of the skin. There's no guarantees that that wasn't going to have any impact on him, and he was fine. And what did he get? He got what you could argue is the best deal. I mean, he got the 4 years. He got paid, $40 million per year. He got the no trade clause, the no franchise tag clause. He's free. He knows that there will be other teams that want him. You look across the league, you could rattle off 7, 8 teams that'll all be interested in his services. So it's not like this is one of those things where he's like, I just don't know. Maybe I need to take a little bit less. But if all things are equal, I don't think there's any question he'd love to stay with the Cowboys. I mean, being the face of that brand, I don't know why anybody wouldn't love to be in that position.
Yeah. But no quarterback in the history of the NFL has had this much leverage that's done this little. And again, he's had a remarkable career on where he was taken. I don't want to mess that up. I mean, Romo used to get so mad at me, of course, when I overcompensated and was too hard on him for things. I was a huge Dak guy. But when you really look at it, name a quarterback that consistently has this much leverage in an organization that has done less than him. It's hard.
Yeah. I know. Well, and here's the thing: he's been willing to play hardball, and his agent's a big part of that too. I mean, his agent does not take deals. You don't see his agent, the guys he represents, being like, "Yeah, we're going to take this team friendly." You can make the argument that Patrick Mahomes, and I don't even think it's that tough of an argument. That Patrick Mahomes deal is pretty team friendly. Now it looks big because it's over 10 years. That's a team friendly deal. The Matthew Stafford deal was a team friendly deal. The year after Dak did 4 for 160, Matthew Stafford did the exact same deal off of winning a Super Bowl. And so there are cases where players have taken a little less, and the Cowboys think that because of a lot of things I just said. I mean, whether you talk about no state tax in Texas, they think because of all the let's be honest, we don't know how much Dak makes in advertisements and that, and clearly one of the big reasons why is the Cowboys. One of the other big reasons why is because he is incredibly marketable because of the person he is. So he's a big factor in that too. But I guarantee you the Cowboys have, whether you talk about that last contract or this next one, they thought he would be willing to take less because it's the Cowboys quarterback, because of all those other things I've mentioned. And Dak has been steadfast and all right, well, let's just see what happens. And he's played hardball, and he's won all the way up until this point.
And it would be hilarious to see him keep playing hardball if they won a Super Bowl. If they get to a Super Bowl or won a Super Bowl and he truly dug in, then if he truly could ask for 65 or 70
if Dak Prescott led them to the Super Bowl, Jerry would have no problem with that. Just think about all the residuals you get off of that. You know how many T-shirts, just the dollars that would come in for the Cowboys winning a Super Bowl for the first time in 29 years. That's why I said if they won multiple playoff games last year and it looked like they were taking the next step, I think the contract's already done. And they're not going to say this publicly because let's be honest, what that makes no sense. For Jerry or Steven to be like, well, we need to see more from him. He just hasn't been good enough. Because then you just raise all these questions of, well, he was second in MVP, and clearly he feels he's good enough. He's not willing to just sign some team-friendly deal. And so all you're doing is you're just going to piss off Dak. So why would you say anything otherwise? So that's why when people say, oh, no, that's not the case. They're just conversating. They're trying to figure this out. that's a lot of words. I'm going by the actions. The actions are,
Yeah.
if you were close, this gets done before free agency starts, so you can add other pieces around him. The actions say Jerry wants to see more.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, you're a guy who'll wear a pullover even when it's warm? Is it has it been chilly enough to need? Should I pack some hoodies? I mean, I've really added to my hoodie game. What kind of weather are we talking with? Has it been gorgeous so far, or is it pretty warm?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It just, you know how it is when you're out here though. It's like during the day is absolutely, the polo weather t-shirt whatever. When you're out in the sun, it just, once the sun goes down, by Texas standards, it gets kind of
Yeah.
chilly. It gets down in the 50s and 60s. So yeah, I would bring in some of those hoodies for your, you know, evening dinners and such. Like you might want to have a light little jacket with you or something.
Galloway used to call it a light wrap. He would always say
There you go.
a light wrap. I never knew why he said that. And he always talked about an iron lung. If somebody like was hurt or something, he said well, they're going to have an iron lung. I'm like, nobody's done that in like 75 years. Okay, so
Well,
man,
hold on that. I'm pretty sure there was a gentleman who passed away within the last year or so in the Dallas area. That was one of the last people I think that was still living in an iron lung. Do you
but
remember that story?
I mean, like it was 70 years ago when they did that to him.
Yeah.
Right when they gave him that. Yeah.
But I'm telling you, he was still in it when he passed away recently.
It was it was a good run for an iron lung person.
Yeah, because typically I thought when you got put in it, that you felt like, well, I'm not going to have that much longer to live.
Yeah.
He died in March. So it was this year, March 11th, and he was 78 years old in Dallas.
That's a good run.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good iron lung run.
Now, sorry to get you off track on that.
It's not hard to do with me. Now on the other stuff, and I'm not going to get into like a million position battles, but other than the CeeDee and the Dak and all these big headlines, you are going to have a training camp, and so this will be Jalen. You got a receiver who's going to get a ton of reps. You've got some interesting. What's jumping out to you? What like kind of position battles have grabbed your attention, or are they set? Kind of what you think they'll do at safety. I'm just wondering, like, what Zimmer will look like. They brought in Kendrick,
Eric Kendricks.
Kendricks, yeah, at linebacker. What on this team when you're out there charting things and looking at training camp? Who has a chance to kind of make a move in this camp?
So I feel pretty strongly, especially from my side is pretty social media heavy, and it's what's going to be the thing fans are most interested in video wise and things like that. And to me, three players stand out, and that's Trey Lance. Not because he's going to take Dak's job. It's because we haven't seen very much of him. Certainly haven't seen anything in a competitive setting. It's been practices during regular season, which when you're the number 3 quarterback is very little. And then it's OTAs and minicamp where the guys don't even have pads on. So Lance is going to be way high on the list, no matter how he looks, good or bad. 2 for me would be Mazi Smith, just because they didn't really do anything at defensive tackle to upgrade the position. So if, let's say, you didn't follow the Cowboys closely, maybe you're just an NFL fan, or maybe you're a fan of another NFC East team, you would look at the actions being of the Cowboys of, oh, they didn't do much at defensive tackle because they got that kid that they drafted in the first round last year. But when you're around the Cowboys and you cover the Cowboys, you're sitting there going, I don't know for sure if what Mozzie's going to even bring in year 2. Like, he's coming off a shoulder surgery. Like, so he's going to be a big one, too. Like, what is Mozzie Smith doing at all? And then number 3 has to be Tyler Guyton, just because he's the first-round pick. Again, we haven't seen him in pads. And so the pads come on, and he's immediately thrown to the Wolves and has to go against Micah Parsons. So that Tyler Guyton, Micah, I would be surprised if there aren't every practice some plays where Micah's just destroying him. I mean, Tyler Guyton's moving over from right tackle to left tackle, and he's going against Micah Parsons, who's arguably the best pass rusher in the league. And Micah's extremely fresh. He's coming off of, several months off. I mean, he's going to be he was by far the most dominant player last year in training camp, and that was going against Tyron Smith. So, that's going to be how does Guyton hold up? Because he's going to get beat. How does he look against that? But when you said, the way you started that question, when you said position groups, the first thing that comes to my mind is, and I'm glad you brought up Kendricks, is because outside of linebacker, with getting Overshown back from the injury and then adding Eric Kendricks, what position group has really gotten better? You could argue if Trayvon Diggs comes all the way back and he's the knee injury is completely behind him, maybe they're a little bit better at corner. But like you go offensive line, they're not better. They're worse. Running back, they're not better. Dak continues to be the quarterback. Tight end, I don't know that they're better. They're pretty similar to what they were last year. Receiver, they're not better. Defensive line, they're not better. Safety, that's going to be the same group. They're probably not better. Like, there's not a position group where you're like, no, that one's outside of maybe I would say linebacker jumps out to me. But normally when you go into training camp, you're like, well, they improved at this position group and this one dropped off a little bit here. This one will say, no, they're pretty status quo across the board.
Well, that's interesting. And they didn't get better on the other side at running back. They're going to be, at least in training camp, missing their star wide receiver. And they did, they should be okay at tight end because you had a guy take a jump last year.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's not this team. And that's why maybe, when you see those over-unders, and I know y'all look at Vegas at the Athletic and you take a peek at all that, I do, because of the history and them winning 36 games the last 3 years. 9.5 seems like a low number, but maybe that's a good number. Maybe, and again, Vegas knows how to put a number up that makes people jump at it. And I think because of the Cowboys' history, the jump people will make is taking the over on 9.5. Do you still lean that way when you try to project this season?
I think it's a really good over-under. I would probably take the under, though. I think it's a 9-10 win team, but I lean more to the 9 and them being kind of closer to a wild card team. I think that Philly has got a little bit of I'm just slightly above them. They have plenty of their own issues, coaching staff, all of that. They could very well, go in a major different direction a year from now, but I just think on paper I would lean towards them a little bit. I think 9 or 10 wins is probably where I would have the Cowboys. If they would have added something at running back, they would have added something at defensive tackle. I mean, defensive tackle was already an issue last year, and they're not even any better than they were last year. Losing Jonathan Hankins, I don't know that they'll even be any better than they were last year, and that's such a position of need. So you're just hoping that Mike Zimmer schemes something up that just makes them so much better. I think that's asking for a lot, and so that's why I think 9 or 10 wins is right where they should be at. I think it was about. I think the line before free agency started was at 10.5, and then they really didn't do anything in free agency. And while I think that I think this draft could be good in a year or two. I don't know that Beebe and Guyton are stepping in right away, and they're even going to play at a level of Biotish or Tyron Smith. They might be of that level in a couple years, but everything is, for a lot of people, is depending on this season, and there's a lot of question marks putting rookies out there like that.
That was an unbelievable run, honestly, based on the fact that Dak and Zeke were rookies in 2016. Won't that be weird? Because in a sense, you're going to see those two guys, and you still picture Zeke as this great leader, and he still may be, but he's obviously a far diminished player than he was 2018, 19, whatever the case may be. That's going to be strange, isn't it? Because it's going to bring back some really good memories, but I mean, to have huge expectations for him, I think would be wrong. Or where are you on that front? From the running game, are you optimistic that they can kind of piece it together?
I'm not optimistic at all on the running game. I do think that, as it sits right now, the two biggest positions of concern are defensive tackle and then running back. But the thing is with running back is you can add some running backs without giving up very much. Whether you talk about guys that can be available when everyone trims down to their 53, or making a trade for somebody, you won't have to give as much up as if you want a defensive tackle that matters. You're probably giving up a mid-round pick for something like that. And so I think they can be okay at running back, but the way it sits right now, I don't have a lot of confidence in them being even as good as they were last year. I think Tony Pollard was in a good spot in his career, and so to lose him, Zeke's on the back end of his career. So the goal clearly is to not give Zeke 15, 20 touches. It's probably to give him 8 to 10, and hopefully he's still playing at a decent level come December and possibly in January, so that you have a Rico Dowdle, a Zeke, maybe somebody else that emerges or somebody from a different roster, and then maybe that three-headed monster works out then. And it could, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying I'm not super confident right now because, wow, now that you even bring it up, I got to ask you, like, when's the last time that's worked in Dallas? Like, I can't even think of, because since I've covered the team, it's really been like a DeMarco Murray right into that one year when they let him go and they went McFadden, but even McFadden had over 1,000 yards, and then you went right into Zeke and Pollard. So it's like, I guess, I mean, because I wouldn't even say it's like that when you had Marion Barber, and then I guess with Tashard Choice and, who's the obvious other one? Oh, Felix Jones. I guess there's three. But the way you felt about those guys at that time, you'd have to feel better about them than you feel about the current running back state. If that was your three-headed monster, as opposed to what they have right now.
Oh, yeah, because Felix it was not that long, but he certainly had some speed and some upside. He was kind of the Pollard before Pollard. And then you mixed him in with a Barber who was a battering ram type guy.
Right.
Barber had his moments, but see, Barber came on the tail end of a actually, people forget about this, but Julius Jones was the guy's name. Is that right? Thomas Jones' his little brother.
Yeah.
Julius came out of the chute in a hurry and was compared to Dorsett and like really looked great as a rookie. And he was a second-round pick. And Barber may have been like a fourth-round pick or something, but he certainly had his moments. But yeah, this is not. Those were like name sort of backs, and this is a name back in Zeke, and then just kind of some nobodies, and we'll see if they can pull something together. But they're basically asking Dak to lean on Dak, and of course it's just weird because McCarthy has given answers in the past like, oh, I want to run the ball, I want to win with her, and it's like, okay, that's not who you are. So I mean, this team was still. As they get into camp, they'll have to kind of decide who they are. And, of course, without CeeDee, it'll look fascinating. But that'll allow you to, whether it's Tolbert or another young player, you will get to write some young phenom stories because somebody will flash in camp. And there'll be a moment where there'll be people go, oh, my gosh, CeeDee better get to camp because Jalen or somebody's looking really good,
You say that though, Matt, and I just have to be okay. I started covering the team in 2011. I've been to a few of these camps. There's a part of me though that I also battle with. I'm not going to be disingenuous about this, and I'm not just going to pump up some guy that it's like because I've seen these stories plenty of times where a guy's the training camp standout. Like I feel like that would be unless it's something that really stands out, then it's obvious. Like no, that this guy's really emerging. Like he's really taking a step. By all means, I would love writing about that story. But I'm also not going to sit here and act like if you're a Cowboys fan, there's not a lot going on right now that you should be super excited about coming off of last year. With how little they did in the offseason, the players they've lost, the question marks that they have, like, it's a tough camp to go into and with a lot of the positive, like, oh, wow, look at this. This is, no, just hold on. This guy's coming along. Like, I mean, there's always guys like that, but it's also a tough sell right now to Cowboys fans. That like the ones that are real knowledgeable and not. I mean, obviously every team's gonna have fans that they're gonna love their team no matter what, and they're gonna buy gear and everything like that. And I totally get that. And if love the team that you love and all that, but at the same time, I try to be as authentic as possible, and I hate selling some storyline on something where I'm just like. Yeah, but is this guy really going to do something? Can you really? Hey, he looked great against the twos out there in Oxnard. Is he really going to be being able to push Brandon Cooks as the number 2 receiver? I mean, I don't know. There just has been. I thought they would do more this offseason to be like, well, we got close last year with the team we put together. We need to do a little bit more. Like they did last year with the trade for Gilmore and Cooks. For them to do basically nothing makes me kind of cautious of trying to sell any fool's gold to fans.
All right, I like it. And the only thing I'll try to sell you on is my man, Mike Zimmer, back in action. It'll be fun to see him, the red-faced Zimmer out there. But it's humorous to me that Cowboys fans are kind of excited for a change at defensive coordinator based on, like, one awful defensive game, right? For the most part, they got a lot of takeaways under Quinn. They got, like, a bunch of scoring defense. The defense was borderline brilliant for a lot of his time here. And that's why the NFL is so great and so weird that by the end of the time, it's like get them all out, get McCarthy out, get Quinn out, and yet over the last 3 seasons, Quinn was as good, as any defensive coordinator they've had since the glory days. So it's, I mean, I mean, not Marinelli, not Monty, not. I mean, I'm just trying to think back over. Not Rob Ryan, of course, not even the great Zim. I mean, Quinn had a really good run, and yet fans were just like, get him out of here. So that'll be interesting to see what Zimmer does. But I mean, I don't think you can act like the defense was horrible over these last few seasons.
To lead the league in takeaways 1 year is crazy. To do it back-to-back years, being the first team to do that since like those steel curtain Steelers defenses, I mean, that's just crazy. In today's NFL, there's just so much randomness for you to be hey, I'm not saying great defenses can't be like, hey, every year, that you could, I don't know, like the Ravens or some of those Belichick defense, they're always like top 10 in takeaways or 15 or something like that. Like you can have consistency, but to lead the league 2 years in a row, crazy. So yeah, you're totally right though. Like they could have won a Super Bowl with him 3-4 years ago, but 3 years passed by where they don't get back to that, and fans are already like to move on to the next thing. That's going to be a tough one with the whole Quinn thing. Is they trying to act like he wasn't a really good coordinator, because I'm not going to do that. It's not only was he good in those 3 seasons, I vividly remember 2020. I know what he took over. That crew that Mike Nolan had to turn it into what he did, like that to me was amazing. It might be the most amazing thing. Now, let's also match in there something else that happened. They obviously used a very high pick on Micah Parsons, and he hit. And they got one of the top, even if you don't think he's the best edge rusher, he's one of the top 3 in football. And they got that without having a top 5 pick, and they turned him into an absolute beast. And so because of that, that's a big part of it. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like it was just all like, just completely schemed up something crazy with, mighty orphans. But I would say Rod Marinelli used to mention the Mighty Orphans all the time, so that's why I thought of that. But yeah, we're not going to sit here and act like Dan Quinn wasn't a good defensive coordinator. What I think is going to happen is you probably won't have as many takeaways under Zimmer. They'll probably be a little bit more maybe fundamentally sound, if that's the right way to put it. And so they might not give up the big plays either. While they might not take it away and make the big plays as much, they might not give up as many, and maybe they're more sound in the running game. So that's where I think maybe the takeaways come down, but maybe your run defense improves, which has obviously been an issue for several years. And so, but in 2 of those people that I just mentioned, though, when you talk about Micah and you talk about Zimmer, like how those 2 get along together and work together is going to be interesting to follow, because one is more of an old school guy and one is a guy that's more of the new age. Like, and let's be honest, if you're Micah Parsons, your coach is on a 1-year deal as a defensive coordinator. If you don't really like him, you're not going anywhere. Like, this isn't like, it's not like John Wooden's coaching the team and they're like, well, if you don't like Wooden's way, then you can just get out of here. Like, no, you're Micah Parsons. You're not going anywhere. They'll get you a new defensive coordinator if you don't like it. And coaches hate that, but I mean, that's just the real world business of it.
Yeah, you're right. When you think of the NBA getting coaches fired, it also happens in the NFL. We don't often think of like defensive players getting a coach fired, but Micah might be the one singular personality or someone that, Mike has to make that work. And in true Mike fashion and Micah fashion, they both kind of had weird comments over the offseason, like, yeah, I hadn't really talked to him. Really hadn't run into him. It's like, okay, neither one of them seemed to be like seeking the other out.
Right.
That's not really Zim style. And then Micah's like, well, I'm a superstar. Like, I'm not going to go begging for, advice from Mike Zimmer. I don't even know who this old guy is. So that'll be interesting to watch. John, here's the deal. I will continue to pay you, lavishly. And, but because of this great time today, I really caught you before everything just ramped up, but I really appreciate the time. You name it. Wherever you want to go out there, when I arrive, I will take, and it's on me, all right? It's on me and Rogue Media Network. Although I don't know if they'll reimburse me, but I'm fine. It'll just be on my dime, and I want to take you wherever you want to go. You name it, all right? Steakhouse, Italian, but I love having you on, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I'll definitely take you up on that. But while you're saying that, I wanted to look it up because I wanted to be accurate on this quote here. Okay, real quick. This is Micah Parsons. When I asked him about during minicamp, I asked him about how everything's going with Mike Zimmer. He's a very quiet person. All I keep hearing from the coach is that Zim likes it this way, but I like it this way. I can't wait to have my true sit down with him. I think it'll be pretty cool because obviously he's old school mindset, old school mentality. He's had a lot of great players, but he ain't never had a Micah before. It'll be fun, and I think it'll be unique. There's some things that I gotta get used to too. It's going to be a compromising relationship, so or compromisable relationship. And so if you're Mike Zimmer, and obviously like okay, you didn't coach Micah Parsons, the exact player, but he's obviously coached a lot of great players, a lot of great defensive players. And so because of that, if you're Mike Zimmer and you read that, I'm sure he just chuckles a little bit. But yeah, he might have his hands full there. But let's be honest, what's he doing? He's not going to not play him. So that'll be a fascinating thing to watch.
It's just that it's going to be a huge change for Micah because Dan was a turn around the cap, get down, get in the stance, and just a player's coach. And it's not like Zimmer doesn't like the players, but not that style at all. He's a hard-nosed, old-school coach. And Dan was a little bit more of a relational guy. And so I think it could be a good change for Micah. But to your point, like, it's not like we're all like, well, Micah needs a change. He's plateaued as a player. He's one of the players that it's still pointing up. So we'll see what he can do with Zim. Jon, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And Jon Machota from The Athletic on Matt Mosley's Obstructed View podcast. I hope we got some of this. I think we did. But thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in person. We'll have a lot of fun out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that this recorded, but even if it didn't, I really enjoyed the conversation, so it was good.
And I need you to pick me up at LAX. Okay, got to go. All right. Thanks, buddy.
I'll see you.
All right, bye.
We are Rogue Media Sports.